Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to April 7, Election Day in Glendale of Housing Authority. May we have a roll call, please?
Authority members: Draymond.
Here.
Mincy.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Parazian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Chairman Yusefian.
Here. May we have your report, please?
The agenda for the April 7, 2009 regular meeting of the Glendale Housing Authority was posted on Thursday, April 2nd, 2009 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
What's next, please?
Next is the oral communication, since there are no minutes for approval. Discussion is limited time, is not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Members of the Housing Authority may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision, and the matter may be referred to staff through the Executive Director for an investigation and report.
And with that, I'll go to Herbert Milano.
Chairman Yusefian, members of the Housing Authority, city staff, my name is Herbert Milano. Chairman Yusefian, I want to thank you for the special courtesy you've granted me as I come here to speak this past year. I think that your chairmanship this year was especially gracious to me, and I guess to some extent to the general public, as little of it has comes here. But I think that your guidance is a good example for others who may follow in your footsteps. I've been coming here to highlight the issues of the social issues that I don't feel get sufficient attention from the Housing Authority or from the City Council. And it has been my intent to highlight how the city can actually address issues that we could very well address and be successful at it. In 2001, one of those other reports that I admire so much that was generated by the staff, it was a report on the status of youth. And I don't know how many of the members of the Housing Authority have had an opportunity to review that report. But it highlighted all of the deficiencies and opportunities that the city has in addressing it. At that time, I remember two numbers that were highly significant. It stated that out of the whole city budget back in 2001, that the city provided only 1% of that budget towards youth. It was 2.4% of the general fund. And when I have looked through my experience at how little it really takes in terms of funds to be able to have effective outcomes with regard to youth, I am saddened that we don't take even more of a proactive action towards it. We continue to depend on HUD and HUD money to provide the support for those nonprofits that are out there doing through volunteers and doing it with very limited means. And I always wonder what it would be like if we were to really create a truly coordinated effort to truly support all of these nonprofits and aim to make a significant difference for a lot of these kids who don't need to be in trouble. I think that there's a significant number of families at risk. The reports that you get from this department, from the housing department, tells you just how precarious life is, especially in these areas of Glendale. 42,000 disabled, 10,000 with very low income, nearly 10,000 with very or extreme low income, and that's going to show up in the schools. And these kids who come from these fragile economic families, who are going into some schools where oftentimes they may not necessarily get the most welcoming teacher, and you basically have the ingredients for potential failure. And the fact that we're not doing sufficiently about it, it's a concern to me. But it's a concern to me more now that I have seen how the city spends its money and how gracious the City Council has been in providing some very significant increases in income to the city management, the GMA, fire department, and police. We have been incredibly gracious. And for us not to think that some of this taxpayer money, now, by the way, that I'm reminded that I still have to make my payment before the 10th of April. So out of all of that money that is being extricated from us, why can't we have a say-so to say, look, it is time to make a change so that these kids do not wind up in trouble and taking up, the resources of the legal system and eventually the resources of prisons and so forth. Why don't we make an effort towards it? I mean, I really seriously don't care too much what other benefits you may receive as councilmen, directly or indirectly or emotional, so long as we decided to spend some time, once a month and take up one of the issues that will eventually appear on the quality of life indicators and say, all right, this month let's concentrate on youth, next month on the elderly, the following month on families at risk, the next month on domestic violence, and so on, and at least show the public that there is more, to this body than just the issues of development. I think that there's an opportunity. This city has the money. If you put the resources where they're really needed, I think that this body has a significant impact, can have a significant impact on families south of the 134. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. That was my last card. Under oral communications closed. What's next, please?
On the business agenda at 6A is public hearing, Director of Community Development and Housing regarding Section 8 Public Housing Agency 5-year plan for fiscal years 2010 to 2014 and annual plan for fiscal year 2009 to 2010. At 6A1 is a resolution adopting and authorizing the submission of the plans to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD.
And with that, I'll go to Madam Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Housing Authority. This is the opportunity to submit to HUD the 5-year plan. It's 2010 to 2014, as well as the annual plan for next year for Section 8. Because we do not anticipate additional vouchers, the plan remains relatively the same. The goals are described in the attached plan as well as in the background. The one change that the plan does propose, which will come back to this body at a future time in the administrative plan, is to broaden the procedures for criminal background checks to include all of the adult household members. But other than that, it remains the same. Because the Housing Authority is a high-performing agency, the annual plan is a streamlined form, just one form that we have to fill out. But staff is here to provide a more in-depth report or answer any questions that the agency may have.
Mr. Quintero.
I know that HUD for a number of years has been emphasizing the criminal background checks, et cetera, but quite frankly, my concern is always people who are on Section 8 whose economic status may have changed, and yet they continue to receive the benefit while other more worthy applicants are waiting. So once again, I'd like to know what we're doing in terms of enforcement. How many inspectors do we have? Investigators, I mean. How many investigators do we have, and what's happening in that part of the program?
Okay.
Mr. Chair, members of the Housing Authority, the Community Development and Housing Department has one full-time investigator working on an hourly basis. His hours tend to be 40 hours a week. He is out investigating leads that are obtained through staff or leads that are obtained through the outside as well.
And do you feel that one is adequate? I mean, does he have what's a caseload? Do you have any idea how many?
It has a very busy caseloads, and they tend to vary over time. If we've put out some type of press release or news article, then the tips tend to increase from the outside. The referrals from within the agency, within the department, stay pretty constant as housing advisors are screening tenants on an annual basis, and then certain questions pop up, and if they're not answered, then we look at whether or not they warrant investigation. Sometimes we have our two housing inspectors that go out and inspect for housing quality standards, assist for some of the more simpler tasks.
Okay. Any idea of, an average caseload per month? Is it 20 or 30 or 150?
100 open cases is what I'm hearing.
So an average caseload for this one inspector is 100 open cases?
Correct. And not all are being worked on every day. There are some that require investigations at different points in the week, different hours during the day, weekends. Some of the investigation involves paperwork, requesting information from other agencies and waiting for responses back. Others, investigation methods are actually out in the field.
And once an applicant or someone receiving the subsidy is determined to be cheating, for lack of a better word, then what? How long does it usually take to sort of adjudicate the situation, so a determination is made, yes, we were right, or no, we're wrong, the person's...
Well, once staff has made a determination that there's been a violation, then we will issue a notice to the client that we are proposing termination based upon the charges that we would provide them in their letter. They have an opportunity to request and a right to request an informal hearing to challenge those charges and provide their information as well. And so the informal hearing is usually scheduled. They've given about a 2-week period of time to request the informal hearing. Once they request that, it's probably another 2-week period of time for us to schedule it with our hearing officer. And then they render a decision within about a week after the hearing.
And then they can appeal to HUD to some...
No, after the hearing officer has made a decision, their only other recourse is to go through the courts.
Okay. How many times has that happened, say, in the past year, 18 months, 2 years?
I don't think someone taking it through the court system has not really happened in the last
year. Not the court
year.
system. How many participants have been terminated because they were not providing the right information?
I would say that the hearing officer has upheld staff's recommendation in about 75% of the proposed termination hearings.
No, I mean number. What's the past year, 2 years?
About 25 cases a year.
And do you feel that you need another little more inspection or, investigation, or do you feel this one person's enough?
At this point, we feel the one person is enough. If HOCLA seems like they're going to be ramping up on their portables, actually on their whole waiting list system, which may then ramp up portables coming into the city, we might look at and request authorization for a second investigator. Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles.
Okay, thank you.
Madeline.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, members of the authority, I just wanted to add that we do annual recertifications every year, and oftentimes those recertifications may generate questions which could lead to further investigation.
Any other question?
Yeah, actually, we have 100 more or less active cases. How many complaints do you generally get to the office? Leads from other...
Leads from the outside tend to be a little bit smaller. I would say 10 a month, maybe.
And then through the recertification process at the end?
We get the balance. We probably monthly get, I'd say 2 from each housing advisor, so close to 20, 25 that a simple follow-up might clear it, and others will go to a more in-depth investigation.
20, 25 a month on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
Let me open the hearing before we go furthermore.
I was just going to note, if you'd like, we can give you some statistics
Yeah, that'd be
on the
interesting.
cases, the nature,
Because
the
look,
ones
like all of it,
the ones that are adjudicated, and their disposition.
I think it's all of us. We're constantly being told by other people, especially seniors who have a lot of time on their hands and are able to observe things. So I'm constantly, as recently as, this weekend, someone mentioned this or the other, and I told them, well, there's a housing community department that you can call and so forth. And, I mean, quite often it's someone who's waiting and perhaps is aware of someone else in the apartment whose
Correct.
economic status has changed, and boy, their ears are out. They immediately know what... it'd be interesting to...
What we'll do is we plan on bringing back, as Madeline mentioned, the administrative plan, which would talk about the criminal background check and the actual process and how we intend to require that amongst all the clientele. We'll also at that time bring back the information about our investigative methods and success rates.
Mr. Macharia.
We hear about Section 8 all the time and the high demand. How can we, as a city, obtain a greater number of vouchers, and whether that's through seeking federal legislation, increasing the budget to HUD? We can't be the only city that's hearing this from many of our residents. And is there any concerted effort from within the League of Cities or any other organization to lobby for an increase in this HUD budget that's apportioned to the Section 8 program? Because I think that's something we should look into. I'm I'm interested in pursuing that. We hear about these billions of dollars going to the auto manufacturers, to the banks, and all that. These, we're talking about the people that are hardest hit. And I don't know if you have a broader vision or broader plan that you could, refer us to or enlighten us on, so we can, when we go to Washington to talk about our federal priority list, that one of them is to mention to our congressmen and our senators that we'd like to see greater funding for the Section 8 programs. And even if that helps cities nationwide, that's fine. I know we're not special. I know they apportion that by population and by need, but that's something I'd like to look into.
We currently do that. We belong to a number of organizations, and we've made numerous efforts to lobby for additional Section 8 funding. We did think that we would receive additional funding with some of the recovery money that was being provided. It all, for the most part, went to public housing units, and not so much vouchers to assist, but capital improvement money to initiate some construction activities. But we can get some information to you as well on our efforts and what else could be done. It's very limited, though. We talk to HUD quite often. Additional funding is very rare. We just look on a monthly basis and hope we receive our administrative fee on a monthly basis and our monthly HAP funding as well. It tends to be sometimes a problem. HAP, Housing Assistance Payments.
HAP.
Mr. Starbird.
Yeah, one of the reasons to put energy into the upcoming 2010 census count, because these monies and vouchers are based on population. So to the extent that we can get a good, accurate count, and we suspect in Glendale there's an undercount that goes on for all the reasons that you can imagine. One of the reasons to make sure you get as accurate a count as possible is that's what goes into this formula to determine these categorical allocations to cities, is population.
I had a question, but I'll come back to it after the speaker. Herbert Milano? I already did.
Thank you. Chairman Yosefin, members of the Housing Authority and city staff, my name is Herbert Milano. I come to speak to you from some of the personal experience. In 2002, Ms. Madeline Blake encouraged me to take at least one or a couple of my units and put them on Section 8. I interviewed about 60 individuals or families. I finally decided on one, and the experience, even though I took a financial hit the first year, has been progressively a very good one. So if there are any other landlords out there who might be looking at this, I think it's a step worthwhile. I've just submitted another unit to be put on Section 8. The impact for me in the first year is at about $4,000 to $5,000, but after that, things should stabilize for me well. I want to make a suggestion with regard to Section 8. My experience is not so extensive as it is for some people who have been at it for a long time or who may have dozens and dozens of units. But something came to mind that maybe some lobbying in Washington might expand the reach, as Mr. Najarian is suggesting. And that is that there are many individuals on Section 8 who are able-bodied individuals. I mean, not the elderly or disabled. And I don't know what proportion of these people are that are taking Section 8. But here's a suggestion. Why not have a continual diminishing assistance so that maybe the first year is cut down 20% and the second year, another 20, and at the end of 5 years it expires. That gives a family, for example, that is coming in with poor language skills and in need of a job to have 5 years to transition into self-sufficiency. And that means that, that 20% then becomes available to new families, for new individuals to have advantage of the program. I haven't studied Section 8 at all, so I don't know to what extent this will require, Washington or lobbying to take effect. But I always thought that if you have an incentive for a family to stay on the program, even though they're both able-bodied, or 2 or 3 of them able-bodied, it actually does prevent individuals who may be in more need to actually come into the program for the first time. So anyway, it's just a suggestion that I thought might be beneficial. And one other comment with regard to the report. As I looked at the reports that the city generally makes available, I find this particular annual report and the other, I think it's the 5-year report, incredibly useful for perhaps augmenting information about the state of the city. I think that the numbers with regard to the number of households in extremely low economic conditions, or the number of households of individuals who are disabled, does allow us to use those numbers for other potential policy-making initiatives. And I think it's a tremendously wealth of information that could be used. I do have a point of interest here with regard to some of the data in this report, and that it says that the vacancy rate is 2.7%. I don't know if we may have changed since the report was originally prepared, but I think it's a lot higher than that. And also that it's up to $1,500 for a three-bedroom. I think it's a bit low. It's still, even under this economic situation, for a three-bedroom apartment. So I don't know if some of the data may need to be updated, or if my perception is maybe incorrect. But I think that when you take all this data and wrap it up and make it easily accessible to the general public, I think it will be served to keep the general public aware of the constraints in which many families are, especially in this area of town, and also the need for us to possibly advocate for policy that would come up to some type of assistance to these families whose economic situation extends well beyond just the need of Section 8. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I had a question on your report on the background section. There's the last item. It says apply for new housing choice vouchers made available by HUD. And I think Mr. Najarian asked the question, will you be getting more? And you said no. And then in the report it says you're applying for new vouchers. Is this
and that's
a 5-year plan? You're saying that
it should be if any are made available to apply. Correct.
Okay. All right. And you did also mention the fact that HOCLA intends to do something. Are they going to eliminate their 1-year requirement?
I don't think we've heard on what they intend to do with their residency requirement. They do have provision for making an accommodation that a number of residents take advantage of in lieu of the residency requirement. But they keep discussing the fact that they will be opening their waiting list soon.
Okay. Madeline.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the Housing Authority, just a couple of things I wanted to mention. One, as part of the Section 8 program, we do have a family self-sufficiency program. In fact, Laura participates. She can speak to it in a lot more detail, but it does exactly what Mr. Milano was suggesting. We have, at any given point in time, a goal of 50 families who are working on improving their skills, going through training with the goal, and they set up an escrow account. Actually gets set up at the same time, so that as their income increases, the money, rather than go to their rent, goes to an escrow account that they then can use for further education, buying a house, or whatever. So that is a positive aspect. Unfortunately, it is a voluntary program. We're fortunate that some families do volunteer to participate in that. The other interesting point is at this point, I think Joseph said over 80% are seniors. Over 80%, 79, close to 80% of our Section 8 participant households are seniors. So over time, families have dwindled in terms of their participation, and it's more seniors now.
Actually, one other aspect that helped generate these large senior numbers is that it's, some of the priorities that were provided during the lottery process favored senior households in terms of points. So within the next 2 to 3 years, we think we'll start to exhaust the seniors on the wait list and start to really look at family households.
And do you anticipate within the next 5 years, within this plan, to reopen the application process?
I think that will still be a significant number of people on the waiting list, but I think that that time that has passed would make really the waiting list maybe obsolete.
It's getting to its 10-year anniversary soon.
We'd have to be looking at the timeline since the last wait list.
Some of that information is starting to become stale. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Is there any other questions? Is there a motion?
Public hearing.
If there are no other speakers, close public hearing.
Let me close the public hearing. Is there a motion?
Move 6A1.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Authority members Draymond,
Yes.
Mincy,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Parazian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Chairman Yusefian.
Aye. What's next, please?
Any authority member or staff comments?
Any comments? Hearing none. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We are adjourned. Mrs. Parazian, you're excused.
I'd like to call to order the Glendale Redevelopment Agency meeting for April